Welcome back to the Adam Schefter Podcast, and welcome back to football. The first preseason game of the summer of the season is this week, the Pro Football Hall of Fame game between the Arizona Cardinals and the Carolina Panthers. All those people saying, can't wait for football. Well, here it is. And let's see how long it takes those same people to say, I'm sick of preseason football. Let's get to the regular season. Should take about a week or two. We'll find out. Nevertheless, Panthers, Cardinals, Thursday night, Pro Football Hall of Fame should be fun to watch. And to help us get ready for Thursday night and everything going on across the league, we now welcome in my friend, my colleague, the co-host of the Pat McAfee Show, Ty Schmit, for this week's six-pack, which is brought to you by ZipRecruiter. Try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/Adam. Meet your match on ZipRecruiter. Ty?
Thank you very much, Shefty. Good to be with you as always. I think that might be wishful thinking. I agree. People, hey, listen, we can't wait for football to get back. Usually I think it takes maybe about 2 to 3 drives in the Hall of Fame game for people to say, enough of this garbage. Let's get to the regular season. But I will say, I wasn't completely there yet. I mean, it's awesome seeing training camp videos and highlights and all that kind of stuff. But it's still, I mean, you kind of, you know what it is. We've done this song and dance before, but I was in Latrobe yesterday for Steelers training camp, and we stuck around for a walkthrough that they had, and that kind of got me back in the mode. I was like, okay, we're here. This is incredible. You know, seeing Rodgers out there throwing balls to DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman and Pat Freiermuth and all the new faces that are there. It finally felt like football was here. So I don't know about the Hall of Fame game and getting too excited about that. I've been burned by that one too many times. But you're right. Football is here, and man, we're just gonna, the actual season is gonna be here before we know it.
And here it is, Thursday night.
Yeah, well said. All right, with that in mind, Shefty, we got a lot of stuff to cover today, so let's get right into this week's six-pack. Topic number 1. Earlier this morning, Bijan Robinson signed a new deal that makes him the highest paid running back in the NFL. What can you tell about us about that, and what does that mean for some of these other running back hold-ins that are going on right now?
Well, Bijan Robinson becomes the highest paid running back in NFL history. It's a 3-year deal worth up to $75 million. The base value in those 3 years is $66.75, $22.25 million per year. He had 2 years and $15 million left. So he's under contract to the Falcons for 5 years at about $90 million. He gets a huge amount of guaranteed money up front. I think it's 57 guaranteed, 31 at signing, a lot of big numbers. And it resets the running back market and elevates these players to a higher tier, which is what they should be paid to begin with. What's interesting about this deal to me is I think everybody viewed Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs in the same bucket, 2 great running backs, 2 top fantasy picks, 2 running backs both staging hold-ins there but not practicing. But what the Bijan deal does is, I believe, it not only helps Jahmyr Gibbs, but I also think it provides a roadmap for another running back in Jonathan Taylor in Indianapolis. And I think this deal now will spearhead the way for 2 other running back deals, not just one that we've been talking about, Bijan and Jahmyr. I think it's 2 other deals that potentially are going to be impacted. And I think we haven't heard more about Jonathan Taylor because he's been there, he's been practicing, he's been a good soldier. You haven't heard as much about it, but I think Bijan, that deal, is going to help produce 2 more running back deals. Now, we'll see how quickly they move. My guess is sooner rather than later, because we have the roadmap. We have the numbers. We know what the value is going to be. And I would think that these 2 other running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs and Jonathan Taylor, now will be up next.
Yeah, I think that would make sense. I mean, we talked about this, I guess we've talked about it a couple times, but it did seem like, especially with Gibbs and Bijan, they were just kind of waiting for whoever was going to get done first, then boom, the second one was going to get done shortly thereafter. I agree with the Jonathan Taylor stuff, especially being here in Indy. We remember a couple years ago when it got really bad in Shane Steichen's first year. The optics didn't look great, him standing on the sideline of training camp with his hood up and all that kind of stuff. But, after last year, he was an MVP front runner through the first 8 weeks of the season when they were one of the best offenses in the NFL. So I think that's well-deserved as well. I don't think any of this stuff is particularly surprising. I think it was always kind of just a waiting game. Like you said, we knew this stuff was going to get done, and well-earned for all these guys, especially whenever Gibbs and Jonathan Taylor get theirs done as well. All three of these guys have earned that massive paycheck because, boy, are they crucial to their team's success.
And all the other running backs are taking note, and all the other running backs are rooting for the market to go as high as possible. And it's now begun to recalibrate to where the top running backs are making over $20 million a year. And the guys that produce at that position now will be paid accordingly, as they should be.
Absolutely, yeah. It's nice to see. I remember a couple years ago when, all the running backs were getting on Zoom and trying to say, hey, let's hold the line, let's stand firm. We're far removed from that situation. And, with the NFL being cyclical and the running back position being more valued now than it was a couple years ago, especially when you're one of those guys who can go out and catch 85 to 100 balls. Well-earned, well-deserved. Glad those guys are getting paid. All right, Shefty, let's move on to topic number 2 of this week's six-pack. We mentioned this last week and the week before. We're going to do it again here. We need an Aaron Donald update. Where are we at right now? Sean McVay has kind of, sprinkled some breadcrumbs along the way, but still no definitive action in terms of if he's coming back. What kind of update do you have for us?
Well, that to me is the biggest hint that anybody has provided when the Rams head coach Sean McVay says it's heading in the right direction and trending upward, which were the exact words that he used. I think that's telling. And I think that tells you that it's tracking for him to come back. But I do want to say this also. I've spoken to some people who have said that Aaron Donald is intent upon recapturing as much Aaron Donald form as he can. And if he doesn't feel like he can do that, he won't come back, despite all this training. Now, it's hard to imagine that somebody's going to put on football pads and a helmet in August, and Sean McVay is going to say what he did, and then the player is not going to come back. But I've spoken to people in and around him that have said he has been very private about this matter, and he's only talked about his actual plans with his family, or so they say. And nobody truly knows what he's thinking. Now, I go back to McVay saying what he did. But I don't know how Aaron Donald is feeling about how he feels about himself when he's on the practice field going through football drills. He doesn't want to come back at 60% of Aaron Donald. He wants to come back at 97, 98, 99, 100% of Aaron Donald. And is that possible? That is the only way in my mind that this doesn't get done and he doesn't come back. If after a couple of weeks when they get back from training camp later in the week and he doesn't feel like he's there, he doesn't want to go out and be an embarrassment to himself. He wants to feel like he's getting the job done, that he's a great compliment to Myles Garrett. And so we've all assumed that he's going to come back. And I still think that that's the most likely course of action. And I think I'd be surprised if he didn't. But my point is there are internal questions that the man himself has to answer before we know what he's going to do. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And, he's not chasing a paycheck. Anything we know about Aaron Donald, he's
correct.
He's talked about as maybe the greatest defensive player of all time. He's certainly in the conversation for maybe the best NFL player of all time. Guys like that aren't coming back just to play grab ass and, I have a chance to win another Super Bowl. If he has even the slightest inkling that he can't go and produce the way he did before he retired, why would you come back? Because then it just leaves a sour taste in your mouth. Then we start talking about, I don't want to say it will alter his legacy because I don't think that happens, but if that's the lasting image that people have of you is, a guy who couldn't quite get it done anymore and maybe should have just stayed on the shelf. Like, he doesn't want that. He wants people to remember how dominant of a player he was. So, yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. But I agree with you. I'm in the same boat. I think ultimately we are going to see Aaron Donald on the Rams this year. It's just a matter of when.
And the other thing that was interesting is I know everybody's making a big deal about him playing with Myles Garrett, which is true. That'd be unbelievable. But my understanding is he loves Kobe Turner and he loves Brandon Fisk and he loves some of those other guys that he already knows, and that he'd be doing it as much for them as he would be to play with Myles Garrett. We've all operated under this idea that Myles Garrett is the linchpin to all this, and certainly it helps. Don't get me wrong. But I think his love of the guys that was there, he knows how special the group is. He loves Sean McVay, loves Matthew Stafford, loves Kobe Turner. Like he wants to be around those guys if that's what he ultimately decides that he can do.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he would love to play with Myles Garrett, I would assume, but I always kind of thought that was a little more media driven, because we have seen the stuff of like he still works out with some of those guys from time to time. We've seen videos of him lifting with, so like he obviously still has a very close relationship with a lot of those former teammates. So yeah, again, that makes perfect sense to me. And then being able to play with Myles Garrett kind of just seems like the cherry on top. So
right.
Who knows? We'll probably be back here next week with another update, and maybe we won't be any closer to it. Yeah, but
it'll be a staple in the six-pack until we know, Ty.
Exactly, and it needs to be, because this would be massive news if he decides to go back to the Rams. So people might be sick and tired of hearing about it because maybe they just assume it's going to happen, and why are we delaying the inevitable? But we don't know yet. It's still up in the air. It's not a foregone conclusion, so we're still going to talk about it, as we should. All right, Shefty, let's move to topic number 3 of this week's six-pack. Let's stay in L.A. There was a Sean McDermott spotting at Rams practice. Does that mean anything to you? What can we kind of pull from? I know this happens a lot with coaches who either get fired or step away. They have a lot of friends around the league, and they bounce around to different training camps. Does this mean anything to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you what it means. When you hear that Sean McDermott is at the Rams camp and he's talking with Sean McVay for 15 minutes on the practice field, and Sean McDermott was at the Giants offseason program one day visiting with John Harbaugh, and he's going around and he's probably going to visit more camps. I think he'll surface elsewhere. What that tells me is that Sean McDermott is intent upon returning to coaching in 2027. And Sean McDermott is taking this year wisely to study how some of the top coaches and top organizations handle their business, so he gets a different perspective and different ideas. So this to me is very wise, and it's an advertisement that he will be, I believe, one of the most sought after head coaching candidates in the 2027 coaching cycle, and he will have a different, renewed, refreshed perspective that he brings to his new employer, whoever that is. And I believe he'll be hired and be back in the league coaching in 2027. I remember when Mike Shanahan, when I was covering the Broncos, was out of football, he went around to Pittsburgh and New England. And even when he was fired from Denver as an offensive coordinator, went back to San Francisco, he always viewed his time there working with George Seifert and the Bill Walsh offense and being around those players and different ideas as something that helped him grow as a coach. And I think Sean McVay is taking that same approach right now, studying other people, and he's telling everybody without telling everybody, yeah, I'm taking this seriously. I'm going to use this time wisely. I'm going to gain an added and new perspective, and he's going to be back coaching in 2027, I believe, Ty.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And we'll obviously see how things shake out and who becomes available, down the road. But if you were to take a straw poll right now, he would be the belle of the ball in terms of coaches that are available next year. And that's not to mention, I don't think anyone necessarily believes it's going to happen, but we'll see what happens with Buffalo's season this year. If they make the playoffs, but they maybe don't look the same, or, they don't have another 12-win season, which it seems like he was just ripping off year after year after year, then that kind of outside noise, or I guess the narrative might be, how the hell did they let this guy out of the building in Buffalo? And it kind of just improves his stock even more. So we'll see what happens there, but I couldn't agree more. Sean McDermott is going to be the head coach of an NFL team next year. I think that's a very easy thing to bet on. I'd say the odds would tilt in his favor massively. All right, Shefty, let's move on to topic number 4 of this week's six-pack. We talked about this with you last week, and I don't know if there's really any movement. The Baker Mayfield situation, he kind of aired everything out, all his grievances, said, hey, I'm going to talk about this once, and then I'm done. I'm not going to be answering questions about it. I'm not going to be doing any contract negotiations during the season. Where do we leave off with that? And also Vita Vea, who we know, hurt his neck and is still looking for a contract. There were trade talks a little bit, but where do we stand with both of those guys?
Before we get to Baker Mayfield, we'll start with Vita Vea. And that situation sounds more dire and more negative than the Baker Mayfield one, which is interesting. Like Vita Vea is in the last year of a deal that's scheduled to pay him $18 million in a market that has been continually reset with defensive tackle salaries. So if anybody has a reason to really feel disgruntled, it would be Vita Vea. And I don't think that this situation is a peaceful one right now. And he's asked for a trade. The Bucs have said we're not interested in trading him. But I think this one could develop into a Micah Parsons-like situation, a Khalil Mack type situation, where the team doesn't want to trade him, isn't going to trade him, but it's not getting him back on the practice field. And the longer it goes on, the more it recognizes that the only choice it might have would be to trade him. So again, nothing now, but I won't be surprised if later this summer something comes down like that. It develops in that way. Now, as for Baker Mayfield, he aired his grievances and wasn't happy with the Bucs, felt, in his words, disrespected by what they offered. And I think the Buccaneers feel like, look, we did the best we could. Both sides have their stances. Baker, disrespected, not happy. The Buccaneers believe that they've offered a 2-year extension worth over $100 million, according to Jeremy Fowler. My understanding is the total money on the 3 years of the deal would place Baker amongst the top 5 highest paid quarterbacks in the game. So he can feel disrespected by the years, which 2 on an extension, giving him 3 years in Tampa, is light. But the money seems to be understandable, like respectable to a certain extent. Now, he might feel like he's a $60 plus million quarterback. And Baker, a bitter Baker, is the best version of Baker, and they'll probably get a great version. But here's the point that I just want to go back to always. I don't care how frosty and tense it gets between the two sides. The Buccaneers still have their franchise tag available for the next 2 years. If they want to franchise tag Baker Mayfield next offseason, it would cost them roughly $47 million. And if they want to tag him again, it would cost them $57 million the next year. So that would be about $105 million over 2 years. They're already offering a 2-year extension over $50 million a year average. I don't know the exact number. Let's call it 101, 102, whatever it is. We're not far off from the franchise number. So it's a tough situation for both sides. They have to do what's right for them, the Bucs. Baker has to do what's best for him. But what I don't see happening is Baker having a great year and Tampa just saying, Baker, thanks for the memories, and letting him walk out the door. 2 franchise tags available for the next 2 off seasons if that's what Tampa wants. So to me, the two sides should revisit their conversations, open it up. Why does that have to get closed off? I know Baker said his deadline was the start of training camp. I don't know. To me, I'd be open to having more conversations and saying, you know what? We've aired our grievances. We understand each other better. Let's see if we get something done by Labor Day. And if we can, great. And if we can't, then we go on and we'll revisit it after the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that the situation is what it is, but I mean, he's going to be in Tampa Bay. It just kind of is what it is. The Bucs know all too well post Jameis, before Tom got there, when they were kind of in no man's land trying to figure out what you don't let a guy like him walk out the door. Quarterbacks, good quarterbacks in the NFL don't go on trees, especially in that division where, no disrespect to everyone else. And there are several teams in that division who look to be much better this year, but the Bucs are truly a threat to win that division every single year. And I don't know how many teams are like that in the NFL where you can point to it and say, hey, listen, going into training camp, like we're probably the favorites this year. It seems like it's been that way pretty much since Drew Brees retired, and the Saints are having a little bit of a resurgence. But like you said, they're not going to let him walk. That's just not going to happen. So at the very least, he gets franchise tagged a couple more times and then goes somewhere else.
We won't get to two franchise tags.
I don't think so either.
We could get to one. To one, depending on how it goes.
And I understand Baker's side of it, feeling disrespected by, hey, I feel like I've done enough. I've proved that I am a franchise quarterback for you guys. I played hurt. I played through a lot. And giving me, just a couple more years, doesn't really give me the same peace of mind that I believe I have earned and deserved. But, we'll see what he does this year. Like you said, the best version of Baker Mayfield is when he's pissed off and when he has a chip on his shoulder.
And so
I think that is huge. The Vita Vea thing is very interesting because I just assumed eventually something's going to get done here. We don't know when it will be. But you bring up Micah Parsons, the same thing. I mean, no one thought Micah Parsons was actually going to get traded. We know how frosty things were between him and Jerry Jones. But I think ultimately, thinking back to it, it was like, listen, Micah Parsons isn't going to get traded. They're not going to let a guy like that walk. They're going to figure something out. And then, of course, he did. So who's to say that the Bucs won't do the same thing with Vita Vea? So we'll see. That would be a massive addition the amount of teams who would be lining up. Now, granted, you have to pay him, but, boy, not many guys can do what Vita Vea can do on a football field.
Worth watching. I'm just saying, that one I don't think is peaceful.
Okay,
perfect. That one I think is in play. We'll see.
Okay, so that's something to really keep an eye on. All right, Shefty, let's move to the fifth topic of this week's six-pack. Another thing to keep an eye on, Maxx Crosby. We've talked about this a bunch since Jerry had his whole deal about the Oregon Trail and, burning wagons and losing a couple weeks. And people kind of immediately associated that with, hey, maybe Jerry's going to trade for Maxx Crosby. We don't know how that situation is there. But you think that the Bears might be in play?
Well, here's how I assess the Maxx Crosby situation. Have you noticed he's talking about how happy he is back in Vegas? He wants to be a Raider. He doesn't want to go anywhere else. This is what he wants to do. And he was the one really that jump-started all that talk and all the movement that wound up with him being traded to Baltimore before he didn't pass the physical and the trade was voided. So I do think right now Maxx Crosby is in Vegas. I do think that that's their plan right now. But here's where I think it gets interesting. Do I think Maxx Crosby is going to be traded this summer? That would surprise me. Anything's always possible in this league. We'll have to see. I don't think that that's the time frame. I think he's there, and they're going to play with him and use him, and he's the face of the franchise, one of the faces of the franchise, and beloved out in Vegas, as he should be, for all the effort and energy that he's brought to that team through some dark lean years. But here's where I think it could change in time. Nobody's going to say it now. But what if the Raiders are not winning regularly? What if the Raiders are 1-5, 2-6, and we're coming up to the trade deadline in the first week in November, and there's a team out there that could use a pass rusher, and Max is playing at the level that we think he can, at another high level? I think that's when the trade potentially could come back into play down the line. I don't think he's looking for it now. I don't think the Raiders are overly thinking about it right now. But if the season doesn't go the way that they want in a very tough division with the Denver Broncos and the Kansas City Chiefs and the Los Angeles Chargers, where they're rebuilding, but they're an ascending team with some great young players, but they might be another year or two away.
Tough schedule, too.
Tough schedule. If they're not there right away, I think as the trade deadline gets closer, I think that's when we could start hearing Maxx Crosby's name again. And I think that's when it might be time to start paying attention. Now, maybe I'm going to be surprised and they trade in the summer, but that's not what I'm expecting. It's not what I'm hearing.
Okay.
I think it changes if and when the season starts to go south, which no team is thinking their season is going to go south right now. I don't care what team it is.
Yeah, no, and you mentioned the Raiders, with all the young pieces and all the money they spent this offseason. I'm sure they feel like they're ascending, and there's a lot of optimism, especially with the new head coach. Everything's fresh. Everything feels new. So, yeah, I can't imagine that they're even considering that, thinking about that at all. But I think you're probably right. I mean, listen, we've talked about this quite a bit in here, and it's, I understand he wants to be a Raider for life and all that kind of stuff. This front office has already traded him once. So
that's why the time to pay attention to a potential Maxx Crosby trade wouldn't be now, but it could be later in the season if the Raiders are not where they want to be.
Okay. Yeah. So that'll be something to keep an eye on, because I think that probably does make sense. I mean, it feels like it's been 3 to 4 years in a row where his name is floated at the trade deadline, where, and maybe that's more of an outside thing, a media driven thing where everyone's kind of saying, this guy's so good. He's an unbelievable player. We want to see him out of Vegas and on a contender so that he can get the chance to play in the playoffs and all that kind of stuff. But again, they traded him this offseason. They got rid of him. They were okay with getting rid of him and kind of moving on. So, yeah, like you said, they have a really tough schedule this year. We have no idea how the quarterback competition is going to shake out. Who knows where they'll be at come trade deadline. And I think you're right. I think if they're, and it might not even be them pushing for it, but like you said, if they're 1-6, 2-6, who's to say a team like the Cowboys or the Bears, or a team that needs that extra little piece to get over the edge and really make a Super Bowl push doesn't come calling, and the Raiders, as they've already proved, are going to be more than willing to listen, I would assume. All right, so yeah, that's good to know, because it did seem weird that Maxx Crosby would get traded before the season. When people were making those connections to Jerry, that didn't really make sense, but
I don't think that's the player that's in play now, but again, we'll see how the summer plays out.
Right, okay, and we'll keep an eye on the trade deadline. All right, Schefty, let's move on to the sixth and final topic of this week's Six Pack. Like I mentioned at the top, we've got so many camp highlights coming out from every single team, and it seems like a lot of defensive rookies have really been making an impact early, turning heads. Who is one that really stands out to you?
Well, look, I keep hearing that David Bailey is tearing it up in Jets camp, and Arvell Reese has been impressive in Giants camp, but I want to direct your attention to the Dallas Cowboys and Caleb Downs. And you listen to the quotes coming out of there, and you listen to what people are saying about him. They're already looking at him as a game changer, as somebody who's changing their defense, their culture, as somebody who's won at all levels of football, as somebody who they're lining up as their nickel cornerback, deploying him all over the field. He's a rookie who plays like a veteran, who thinks like a veteran. And the Dallas Cowboys, and it's early on, look like they hit the lottery on Caleb Downs, who slid right into their laps. It worked out perfectly. A lot of people thought he would go in the top 10, maybe to Washington, but Washington took Sonny Styles, and somehow Caleb Downs fell a little bit down the board right to the Dallas Cowboys. And we've seen rookie defensive backs come in and make a huge difference. And we'll see how this one plays out. But the early signs are that Caleb Downs is going to make an enormous difference in Dallas's defense. It sounds like he's going to be square in play for the NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year. And if Caleb Downs is what they say he is and what they think he is, well, guess what? Dallas's defense is going to take a dramatic step forward and have a lot of improvement from that one guy, not to mention all the other pieces that they picked up on their defense to try to improve it. Caleb Downs, watch out for him. We knew that, but it's been reaffirmed so far through the early part of training camp.
Yeah, and I don't think that surprises anyone. I mean, his name was thrown around in there with Jeremiah Love as kind of, hey, this guy might be the best overall player in the class. And then there was that weird thing about his knee, and did he have like degenerative knee issues, and maybe that had to do something with his slide. But I think back to, we were down in Tuscaloosa doing a college, football simulcast several years ago. It was his true freshman year at Alabama, and Pat and D-Butt were talking to an Alabama staffer, one of their former teammates, before the game, and he pointed at Caleb Downs and he said, "That guy's a gold jacket," And then you watch him play. Every time we watched him play, it was like, that guy, he's playing today. He could suit up tomorrow. He could play tomorrow for any team in the NFL. So as long as he stays healthy, yeah, I don't think that surprises anyone, and I think that could go down as one of the bigger steals of the draft.
And I think it certainly sounds like it will be. And again, You start to get a lot of training camp buzz early on, and we're only about a week, 10 days in, but there's been an awful lot of buzz surrounding Caleb Downs. All right, you know who congratulations are also in order for, Ty? Speaking of the former Ohio State safety, all the former Ohio State wide receivers. Chris Olave gets a 4-year, $132 million extension. And think about all the wide receivers that have come out of Ohio State this offseason. Jackson Smith and Jigba, 4 years, $168.6 million. Garrett Wilson on a 4-year, $130. Terry McLaurin last summer, 3 years, $97 million. No school has had wide receivers make more money than this group of wide receivers, and Jeremiah Smith is still to come, and who knows what he's going to make if Jackson Smith and Jigba is over $40 million a year, and Chris Olave is at 4 years, $132 million. Jeremiah Smith, if he's as good as we all think, he's going to change everything and be incredible in the NFL, and his earnings are untapped. Also, we mentioned the Pro Football Hall of Fame game Thursday night. I want to congratulate in advance the 5 new members of the 2026 Hall of Fame class, which will be broadcast Saturday, August 8th at noon on ESPN. Those players in alphabetical order: Drew Brees, Roger Craig, Larry Fitzgerald, Luke Kuechly, Adam Vinatieri. They've combined for 38 Pro Bowl appearances, a great class. Brees, as important as any player in Saints franchise history. Roger Craig was this great all-purpose running back. Larry Fitzgerald was such a pro and has run his life like that, and I love that guy. Just class personified. Luke Kuechly, intense. Now going to be with, what is it, Amazon Prime? Is he's doing the game? Is it Amazon or Netflix? He's one of these streamers.
Yeah.
Netflix. And Adam Vinatieri, to me, made the greatest kick in NFL history in the snow to beat the Raiders and launch the Patriots dynasty. So we've got a great Pro Football Hall of Fame class this year that'll be inducted Saturday, and we want to send our sincerest and truest congratulations to this great Hall of Fame class. All right, Ty, we're back. Great job today by you. Football's back. Great job by our producer, Dan Stanzik, Ben Smith, and for the listeners to tuning in to another Adam Schefter podcast. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the Adam Schefter podcast. We'll be back in this spot next week with the latest training camp buzz and NFL storylines. Until then, enjoy the start of preseason football.